Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today we'll talk about a bank that J.K. Rowling only slightly revealed to the reader in her books, but which hides far more mysteries than it seems. Of course, I'm talking about Gringotts, a place where goblin gold meets magic and secrets. Make yourself comfortable. Ahead are some amazing facts that could easily have gone unnoticed. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Slightly extreme security measures. Gringotts was never a simple bank. Everything here revolves around the level of protection. Families like the Weasleys or the Potters make do with an ordinary vault key, but the richer the client, the deadlier the obstacles. Nicholas Flamel's vault cannot be opened without the participation of a bank employee. As for the Lestranges, that's where a dragon comes in, blind but trained to guard. In addition, the very walls and vaults can be infused with powerful enchantments capable of burning any uninvited guest. Number 2. Use of Probity probes. Before stepping inside, visitors undergo a check with Probity probes. These are thin golden rods that react to hidden spells. Essentially, it's a magical equivalent of both a lie detector and a metal detector rolled into one. By the way, Argus Filch at Hogwarts used similar enchantments. The Golden Trio bypassed this inspection only thanks to the Imperious Curse, when Harry took control of a goblin and diverted suspicion away from Hermione disguised as Bellatrix. Number 3. A system for exchanging Muggle money. For children raised in the Muggle world, Gringotts is a true lifesaver. Here you can exchange pounds or dollars for galleons, sickles and knuts. How exactly goblins deal with the Muggle money afterward remains a mystery. Do they resell it or hide it in secret trade networks? Whatever the answer, they always stay unnoticed. Rowling left this part to the imagination of the fans. Number 4. Motto. The bank even has its own Latin motto, Fortius quo fidelius, strength through loyalty. At first glance, it sounds like a slogan for clients, but if you think about it, it's more likely to reflect the philosophy of the goblins themselves. Their centuries-old distrust of wizards may well have given rise to such an unusual creed. Number 5. Twice changed hands. Right after its founding, the Ministry of Magic decided to take the bank under its control, most likely through force, since relations between wizards and goblins were always strained. Only centuries later, after a series of goblin uprisings, was control returned to the goblins. Since then, Gringotts has been considered an exclusively goblin-run institution. Number 6. Named after its founder. The bank itself was named after its founder, the goblin Gringott. Little is known about his life, but his contribution was so significant that his likeness even appeared on a chocolate frog collectible card. And near the entrance to the bank in Diagon Alley stands a golden statue of the founder, a kind of symbol of power and independence. Number 7. Founded in 1474. And finally, a bit of history. Gringotts was founded in 1474, making it one of the oldest financial institutions in the wizarding world. Before that, it's unclear how wizards conducted financial transactions. Moreover, Rowling's economic system is full of riddles. Why, for example, is the exchange rate fixed, 29 knuts to a sickle, and 17 sickles to a galleon? And why has it never changed? The question remains unanswered. Number 8. Underground depths where one can get lost forever. The vaults of Gringott stretched far below London, deeper than Harry ever imagined during his first visit. The goblin who guided him muttered that even they did not know the true end of the tunnels. "Deep, deep below you'd be lost without us," Griphook once warned, Philosopher's Stone. Some passages were said to be older than the bank itself, carved by forgotten hands. Those who wandered too far risked vanishing into the earth, swallowed by silence and shadows. Legends told of strange creatures lurking in the lowest shafts, not dragons but beings twisted by time and magic, things that even goblins avoided. In the 17th century, a young wizard named Oswald Beamish reportedly tried to reach the final vault. He never returned. The only clue left was his wand, found years later, blackened and cracked on a stone ledge. Stories like his gave weight to the warnings. The deeper one went, the less likely they were to find the way back. Number 9. Magical carts and their secret mechanism. Harry's first ride in the cart with Hagrid was unforgettable. The little vehicle shot forward, twisting through the darkness with impossible speed. It did not follow a simple track. It plunged, spun, and chose routes without hesitation, as if guided by an unseen hand. "Can we go any faster?" Harry asked, clutching the side. Hagrid groaned, turning pale, but the cart only dove deeper. Philosopher's Stone. This was no machine of wheels and rails. It was magic itself. Scholars suggested the carts were bound to goblin blood. A goblin touch set them moving, and their enchantments carried them flawlessly to the correct vault. Even when Harry and Hagrid passed dozens of branching tunnels, the cart never faltered. It knew where to go. Bill Weasley later explained to his brother Charlie that the carts aren't just vehicles, they're guardians in their own way. The goblins did not need maps, their magic chose the path with unerring accuracy. The mystery of their mechanism only deepened after the break-in at the Lestrange vault. Hermione whispered, terrified, that the cart seemed to reject their presence once Griphook left them. Without the goblin, the spell broke, and alarms rang. That moment confirmed the suspicion. The carts were not bound to rails, but to loyalty. They were enchanted extensions of Gringotts itself, watching, guiding, and betraying anyone who dared enter without true goblin sanction. Number 10. Ban on magic inside the bank. The rule in Gringotts was absolute. No magic could be cast within its walls. The marble seemed alive with silent power, swallowing spells before they could spark. Wizards who ignored this law paid a heavy price. A simple charm could rebound, twisted, and magnified, striking its caster with deadly force. The goblins had designed it this way to prove that wands had no place in their fortress. Harry felt the weight of this magic during his first visit with Hagrid in Philosopher's Stone. As they stepped into the glittering hall, Hagrid leaned down and whispered, "Best you don't try any funny business in here, Harry. Wizard's magic don't work the way you think." Hagrid's warning carried truth. In that place, even Dumbledore's spells would have meant nothing. The bank itself enforced its own law. Historians recalled one wizard, Maddox Warrington, who in the 1800s tried to hex a goblin clerk to gain access to a restricted vault. His wand sparked once, then snapped clean in half. Warrington collapsed screaming, his own curse carved against him by the enchanted stone. The goblins dragged him away, and his name never appeared again in wizarding records. Stories like his were retold as cautionary tales, a reminder that magic obeyed Gringotts, not the other way around. This ban explained why so few ever attempted open assault. A wizard's greatest weapon was useless in those halls, stripped away by invisible runes humming in the walls. To rob Gringotts meant relying on deception, trickery, or help from the inside. Force was a fool's choice, and that was how the goblins wanted it, every visitor entering under the same silent rule. Here, even magic bowed to the bank. Number 11, the greatest heist in history. Gringotts carried its reputation as unbreakable for centuries, but the day Harry Potter broke into the Lestrange vault shattered that illusion. Disguised as Bellatrix and aided by Griphook, Harry, Ron, and Hermione descended into the depths where treasures glimmered like molten fire. What awaited them was chaos. The vault itself turned hostile, spitting out treasure that multiplied and burned. Rowling wrote, "The hotter and heavier the objects became, the more they multiplied, so that soon they could barely move for the weight pressing upon them. Deathly Hallows." It was not a simple theft, but a desperate battle against the very magic meant to keep thieves away. The prize they sought was not gold, but Helga Hufflepuff's cup, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Against all odds, they seized it. Their escape, however, is what cemented the heist in legend. Bursting free on the back of the blind dragon that guarded the vaults, they smashed through the marble roof into the open sky. To see 3 students ride a beast of fire and scales out of the most secure bank in Britain was something no wizard had ever imagined. Griphook vanished in the chaos, clutching the goblin-forged sword, proof again of that bitter divide over ownership. But Harry's heist was not the first whisper of theft in the bank's history. Among goblins, there were half-told stories of darker times when wizards in the 17th century tried their luck. A group of warlocks is said to have forced their way deep into the vaults, hunting an unnamed relic. Records never revealed what it was. The tale ends with fire, claws, and the roar of a dragon unleashed in the tunnels. Only scraps of their cloaks were said to have been recovered. Goblin memory is long, and the silence that surrounds this event is telling. To them, shame lay not in the dragon's intervention, but in the very fact that Gringotts had nearly been breached. That silence lingered until Harry Potter, his break-in and his wild escape, proved that even the safest place in the world could bleed. And for the first time, the legend of Gringotts was scarred with failure. Number 12. Goblins and their special view on money. To goblins, money was never just coin, and ownership was never simple. When a goblin forged a sword, a cup, or a crown, they believed it remained theirs forever, no matter how many hands passed it along. Wizards never understood this view, calling it stubborn pride, but to goblins it was law. That belief shaped the very soul of Gringotts. Every vault, every key, every treasure was guarded with a loyalty born not of service to wizards, but of a conviction that it all still belonged to goblin kind. The clearest example came with the goblin Griphook. During the Deathly Hallows, he told Harry, "The sword of Gryffindor was made by the goblins. It belongs to goblins. It was stolen from us." His voice carried centuries of bitterness. For Harry and Hermione, the sword was a tool to destroy Horcruxes. For Griphook, it was the proof of wizard treachery, the theft of goblin craftsmanship dressed up as trade. This clash of beliefs made their uneasy alliance fragile, doomed by different views of ownership. Inside Gringotts, this philosophy turned the bank into something more than a vault of riches. Goblins did not guard treasure for the sake of wizards. They guarded it as if it were a fragment of their own legacy. When vault doors closed, goblins watched them not as servants but as wardens, protectors of what they saw as rightfully theirs. That explains the razor-sharp distrust when wizards tried to interfere in banking matters. To let a wizard rule the bank would mean surrendering the very core of goblin culture. This is why Gringotts felt alive with suspicion, a fortress bristling with unseen defences. It was not just gold Harry saw stacked high in piles, but centuries of wounds and pride locked away. Every goblin eye reminded visitors that money to them was not exchanged, but borrowed. Wizards called Gringotts the safest place in the world. For goblins it was far more, a citadel of their values, and a reminder that nothing a goblin makes ever truly leaves goblin hands. Number 13. The legend of the indestructible vault. Whispers among wizards spoke of a vault so ancient that even goblins feared to touch it. They called it the indestructible vault, a chamber buried far beneath the lowest rails of the carts. No key could turn its lock, no spell could force its hinges, and even a dragon's fire would die against its doors. Older goblins claimed it was sealed with magic from a time before Gringott himself, a craft so lost that not even their kind remembered the words to break it. The mystery of what lay inside stirred endless theories. Some said it was the lost relic of Godric Gryffindor, a weapon meant never to fall into human hands. Others whispered of Helga Hufflepuff's enchanted recipes, or even Rowena Ravenclaw's private notes. But the darkest rumour of all was that Salazar Slytherin had hidden something so cursed that only goblins dared to watch over it. "There are vaults hundreds of miles below the main floor," Griphook once said in a hushed voice to Harry. "Vaults that are older than the bank itself." Deathly Hallows. The idea of such a vault was not impossible. Vault 713, which once held the Philosopher's Stone, had been declared unbreakable, yet even that could be opened with Goblin consent. Harry remembered Hagrid's words when they first descended. If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped inside. Sorcerer's Stone? If ordinary vaults carried curses so brutal, what terrors would guard the indestructible one? Some believed the vault was not a storage room at all, but a prison, a chamber where goblins locked away things too dangerous to destroy, a Horcrux that predated Voldemort, a mirror that showed not desire, but despair. The legends refused to fade. Every cart that rattled deeper into the rock seemed to carry with it the echo of that forbidden door, waiting for the day someone would be foolish or desperate enough to try and open it. Number 14, Flaming Charms in the Corridors. The goblins never relied on brute strength alone to keep Gringotts safe. Deep in the marble halls, hidden from casual eyes, flames were waiting. Not ordinary fire, but living magic that sparked into existence the moment an intruder crossed an invisible boundary. It was said that water turned to steam before it touched the blaze, and charms dissolved as though swallowed by the heat. To stumble into such fire meant certain ruin, and the only protection was never to face it at all. One of the clearest examples came during the escape of Harry, Ron, and Hermione in the Deathly Hallows. As they fled through the vaults, the enchantments within the Lestrange chamber erupted into chaos. The room filled with multiplying treasures, and while no direct flames lashed out, the principle was the same. Gringotts punished trespassers not with warnings, but with deadly magic. The gold was multiplying and multiplying, spilling from the cupboards and tumbling across the floor, burying their feet in hot, heavy metal. Rowling, Deathly Hallows. It was heat that scalded, and it carried the same merciless quality as the rumoured fire in the corridors. The goblins themselves spoke of these protections with an air of pride. Bill Weasley once warned Harry that the bank's defences were not to be underestimated, telling him, "There are enchantments and curses on the vaults to prevent anyone but the goblins from removing the contents." Goblet of Fire. His words hinted at dangers few outsiders could even imagine. Among them were the flaming charms, silent, invisible and patient, waiting for a thief to test their luck. What made this fire so terrifying was not just its resistance to water or spells, it was the sense that it carried judgment. A dragon could be outwitted, but flames that appeared from thin air had no eyes to trick, no leash to break. They were part of the bank itself, as if Gringotts had grown its own immune system against intrusion. The story passed among young wizards was always the same. Once the flames found you, there would be no second chance. Number 15, Cursed Keys. The great marble hall of Gringotts has always been described with awe, its vaulted ceiling and burnished bronze doors projecting an image of wealth and unassailable security. Yet behind the polished counters and the polite, clipped tones of the goblin tellers lies a labyrinth of secrets. Wizards who entered the bank often noticed the goblins watching them with expressions that bordered on mocking. The reason for those sharp smiles was not merely arrogance, it was the awareness of hidden protections few humans ever understood. Among the deepest mysteries were the so-called cursed keys, forged from alloys known only to goblin smiths, and bound not by spellwork alone, but by blood and identity itself. These keys were far more than metal, they were guardians, and to underestimate them was to risk a fate worse than the most savage guard dragon. The ordinary visitor believed that keys at Gringotts functioned much as they did in the mundane world, albeit with a touch of enchantment. Hagrid himself once revealed to Harry Potter that he carried a key to the small vault that held the boy's inheritance. It seemed unremarkable, a simple sliver of metal, yet it could summon a cart and open a door several miles beneath London with a single touch. But what was hidden from Harry's innocent eyes was the reality that not all keys were alike. Some vaults, particularly those belonging to the oldest families or holding the darkest treasures, had locks that defied any notion of simplicity. They were Alive with curses, and their keys could recognize betrayal as easily as a goblin could recognize gold. Goblin craftsmanship has always stood apart from wizard work. The enchantments woven into their creations are subtle, deep, and nearly impossible to replicate. A wand responds to the wizard who wields it, but a Gringott's key responds to the will of its rightful owner, often punishing any hand that dares to steal. One such key belonged to the Lestrange family, whose vault held Horcrux-tainted treasures that nearly destroyed Harry and his companions. The legends whispered among goblins suggest that Bellatrix's vault key was not merely forged but cursed with intent. To attempt to use it without permission was to invite agony. Wizards dismissed these tales as exaggerations, but goblins, who valued their forges as sanctuaries, knew the truth. For them, such measures were not mere ornamentation, they were justice in metal form. The mechanism of the cursed key was cruel and final. According to accounts preserved in Goblin archives, the moment an unauthorized wizard attempted to thrust one of these special keys into its lock, the metal heated as if forged anew, burning flesh to the bone. Some stories went further, claiming that the unlucky thief would vanish, swallowed into the vault itself as food for the curses that lurked there. "Enter, stranger, but take heed," warned the poem engraved at the entrance of Gringotts in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Those words were not metaphorical. The cursed key was the silent enforcer of that warning, a trap disguised as permission. To the untrained eye it seemed harmless, but it carried within it the patient malice of goblin enchantment. The example most often cited among goblin tellers is that of Corvinus Burke, a dark artifact dealer whose name would later echo through the story of Lord Voldemort. Decades before the boy who lived was born, Burke is said to have attempted to bypass a vault key given to him by a duplicitous client. The key belonged not to the client, but to a widow of a noble house who refused to part with her cursed trinkets. Burke, greedy for possession, slid the stolen key into the lock. Witnesses recalled that his scream echoed through the caverns. When the goblins arrived, they found only a blackened husk where his hand had been, and eyes that stared forever into nothing. His story became a cautionary tale, not only for thieves but for arrogant wizards who imagined goblins could be tricked. The curse was not random malice, it was precise and deliberate. A cursed key was bound to the bloodline of its rightful owner, responding to touch as if it could smell the very veins beneath the skin. Griphook, the goblin who later guided Harry, Ron, and Hermione through the bank, once hinted at this power with a gleam in his eye. "Goblin-made objects," he explained, "are not meant to be passed from wizard to wizard without consequence." His words resonated with bitter truth. Just as goblin-forged blades return to their makers in death, so too did keys resist the grasp of outsiders. To a goblin, ownership was not a matter of possession, but of honor, and the cursed key was the embodiment of that principle. One might wonder why such dark enchantments were necessary at all. Could not ordinary locks and dragon guardians suffice? The answer lies in the arrogance of wizarding society. Wizards believed themselves masters of spells, capable of unlocking any door with the right charm. The goblins, mistrustful after centuries of exploitation, responded with devices that magic alone could not outwit. The cursed key was not susceptible to Alohomora or any unlocking charm taught at Hogwarts. It demanded allegiance, and it punished presumption. For goblins, the smile they offered when presenting such a key to a wizard was edged with irony. They knew the wizard held a tool that could just as easily destroy him as serve him. Number 16, the Secret Archive of Debts. The grandeur of Gringotts has always fascinated readers of the Harry Potter series. Its marble floors, surly goblin bankers, and treacherous vaults form the heart of wizarding finance. Yet behind the glitter of galleons and the security charms that even dragons guard, there exists a lesser-known truth about the bank. The existence of the so-called debt archives, a secret repository where obligations are recorded in ink that never fades. These scrolls, bound with runes older than Hogwarts itself, serve as a reminder that debts to goblins are not a fleeting agreement, but a permanent chain, one that can clasp onto a family for generations. The very idea challenges our notion of wealth and freedom, for at Gringotts, what is owed can matter as much as what is owned. The archive is not kept in the same labyrinth of vaults where families like the Malfoys or the Blacks stored their treasures. Instead, it lies in a shadowed chamber below the main banking hall, protected by curses so complex that even Bill Weasley, a skilled curse breaker, once admitted he had never seen anything quite like them. "Goblins don't trust anyone, not even their own kind," he once remarked in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when describing the depth of goblin grudges. That sentiment extends perfectly to the archives. A goblin may forgive, but the scroll does not. The parchment itself carries an enchantment that resists flame, water, or even the most powerful vanishing spells. Wizards who have tried to erase their names from the records found themselves with seared fingertips and scars that spelled the word debtor across their skin. Among the families most entangled in this hidden system were the Carrows, a pure bloodline whose loyalty to the dark arts never shielded them from financial folly. During the years following the first fall of Voldemort, the Carrows attempted to restore their dwindling influence by borrowing heavily against heirlooms that had once belonged to Salazar Slytherin's circle of followers. The goblins accepted the collateral, but when the family could not reclaim the pledged relics, the debt scroll absorbed their names in crimson ink. Years later, when Electo Carrow strutted through Hogwarts as one of Voldemort's enforcers, the court. Goblins still whispered about the unpaid obligation. To them, her cruelty mattered less than her unpaid bills. It is a chilling example that even the darkest wizards could not terrify Gringotts into forgetting what was owed. The case of the Carrows illustrates another unnerving feature of these archives: inheritance. Debt in Gringotts does not end with the death of the original borrower. Instead, it seeps into the family line, binding itself to blood as firmly as any curse. An unsuspecting child could come of age to discover that their vault was not a trove of galleons, but a hollow echo, emptied to satisfy obligations made decades earlier. This rule explains why cautious families, such as the Longbottoms and the Bones, rarely borrowed, even in times of need. Frank Longbottom, a man known for his bravery as an auror, once told colleagues that borrowing from goblins is no different than signing away your children's safety. Such warnings were passed down with as much seriousness as defensive spells. The magic binding these debts is older than most wizarding institutions. Goblin chroniclers trace it back to the founding of Gringotts in 1474, when the first goblin banker, Gringott himself, created a system to ensure that wizards respected agreements. In those days, wizarding society was far less regulated, and disputes over gold often ended in duels or bloodshed. By inscribing debts on enchanted parchment, Gringott provided his kin with a weapon sharper than any blade, the weight of memory that no spell could erase. Over centuries, this archive became as sacred to goblins as the ownership of goblin-forged blades, a subject that already causes friction between the species. Wizards may argue over the fairness of such a system, but to goblins the archive is justice incarnate. Some scholars suspect that the tension between goblins and wizards throughout history has as much to do with these debts as with ownership of magical artifacts. During the infamous Goblin Rebellion of 1612, records indicate that one of the sparks for violence was the wizarding attempt to destroy portions of the archive. The ministry believed that eliminating debt scrolls would weaken goblin control over wizarding families. Yet when aurors tried to burn the documents, the parchments screamed in voices that echoed through Diagon Alley, and flames turned back upon the attackers. Rebellion was crushed, but the incident solidified the goblin conviction that their system was indestructible. To this day, the debt archives remain untouched by ministry decree, existing in a space outside wizarding law. It is worth noting how these debts intertwine with the social hierarchy of the wizarding world. Wealthy families, such as the Malfoys or the Lestranges, often flaunted their riches, but even they knew better than to incur debt lightly. Lucius Malfoy's disdainful pride masked a deep caution when it came to goblin dealings. The Malfoy fortune was largely self-sustained, which spared Draco from inheriting chains of obligation. In contrast, less affluent families, pressed by necessity, sometimes fell into debt traps. The Crouches, for example, faced rumours that Barty Crouch Senior had turned to goblin loans during his ambitious push within the ministry. Whether true or not, the whispers damaged his reputation, for to owe goblins was considered a mark of weakness, even among ambitious wizards. There are stories, half forgotten and yet persistent, of individuals who attempted to flee from their debts by disappearing from wizarding Britain altogether. One such tale involves a man named Crispin Dearborn, a distant cousin of Order member Caradoc Dearborn. Crispin vanished in the 18th century after defaulting on a goblin loan. Decades later, explorers in the New World reported encountering a wizard whose arm bore a scarred inscription that spelled, "Bound by Gringotts." His descendants, it is said, carried the mark for 3 generations, a visible reminder that escape was an illusion. Whether apocryphal or true, such tales reinforce the pervasive fear of goblin vengeance that haunts the wizarding imagination. Number 17. Dragons are not the only guards. Under the glittering chandeliers of Diagon Alley, few visitors ever paused to wonder what lurked beneath the marble floors of Gringotts. To most witches and wizards, the Goblin Run Bank was already an intimidating place. Its vaulted ceilings, razor-eyed clerks, and long polished counters conveyed both wealth and danger. Yet the true power of Gringotts was hidden far below, in tunnels carved through stone older than the castle of Hogwarts itself. When Harry Potter descended with Hagrid in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the goblin Griphook warned him in his flat voice, "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed." Those words were not mere decoration, but a sober reminder of what lay ahead. For though dragons guarded certain vaults, whispers among goblin kind spoke of guardians far stranger than fire-breathers. The most famous of these guardians was the blind dragon that Harry, Ron and Hermione encountered in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Its pale hide, chained in misery, guarded the Lestrange family vault. Its roars echoed through the cavern, and its scarred skin bore the cruel signs of goblin training. Yet even that dragon, terrifying as it was, represented only a fraction of Gringotts' arsenal. Goblins never relied solely on beasts. Their craft lay in enchantments, traps, and bound creatures that obeyed no wizard's wand. Ancient stories claimed that long before dragons were ever used, Gringotts had stationed stone giants within its passages. These were no ordinary statues, but constructs carved by goblin smiths and animated with runes of command. When intruders attempted to storm a vault during the reign of Minister Eldritch Diggory in the 18th century, the tale goes the floor trembled as 2 colossal golems awakened, their eyes glowing like molten silver. The raiders were crushed, and their remains were never returned to the surface. What makes such legends compelling is that fragments of evidence linger in goblin records. At the British Library of Magical Lore, an archived dispute between Gringotts and the Ministry mentions animated guardians of unyielding stone. Though the Ministry attempted to demand their dismantling, citing the risk to human life, the goblins refused. They argued that without such measures, the gold of wizards will not remain in the dark. Even centuries later, goblin clerks grow silent when asked about such guardians, but their evasiveness only fuels the belief that these golems still prowl certain forgotten vaults, ready to rise if disturbed. Wizards like Albus Dumbledore, who understood goblin history, never dismissed the idea outright, though he was careful not to confirm it publicly. Equally disturbing were the rumours of enchanted trolls. Unlike the wild mountain trolls that Professor Quirrell once foolishly released at Hogwarts, these were said to be bound by complex charms, rendering them both tireless and obedient. Some goblins allegedly took pride in controlling creatures that no wizard could tame without risk of sudden rebellion. In the deep tunnels where few humans ever walked, the sound of lumbering footsteps could sometimes be heard echoing beyond sealed doors. There is a curious mention in the Daily Prophet archives from 1892 when a failed break-in left the stone walls smeared with what witnesses described as greenish ichor. While goblins explained it away as alchemical residue, others suspected the attackers had been torn apart by one of these monstrous servants. If such trolls exist, their loyalty belongs to goblins alone, and even a spell as powerful as Imperius might falter against the ancient bonds woven into their flesh. Yet among all these whispers, the most unsettling legend speaks not of flesh or stone, but of shadows. These are said to dwell beyond the lowest vaults, where even goblins tread rarely. Shadows that move against the light, slipping across the walls like liquid night. Unlike dementors, which feed on hope and joy, these phantoms are described as hunters, stalking those who lose themselves in the labyrinthine corridors. An old tale told among goblins recounts a wizard thief in the early 19th century who penetrated deeper than any before him. His name was Corbin Mulciber, infamous for his cruelty and black market dealings. Mulciber supposedly vanished after entering a lower passage where the torches failed to burn. When goblins followed later, all they found was his wand, snapped in two, lying beside a smear of shadow darker than the stone itself. Skeptics argue that such stories are little more than goblin propaganda designed to terrify would-be thieves, but others note peculiar similarities between these shadows and a magical phenomenon known as lethifold or living shroud, recorded in New Guinea and feared throughout the wizarding world. Lethifolds suffocate their prey in silence, leaving no trace but a vanished body. Could the goblins have imported such creatures, binding them to their vaults? The possibility lingers, especially when one recalls that not all magical beasts are catalogued by the Ministry, and Gringotts has never allowed deep inspection of its caverns. Hermione Granger herself in Deathly Hallows remarked that goblin magic was different, more ancient, less dependent on wands. Such magic might well extend to mastering creatures that defy wizarding control. Harry Potter's own narrow escape from Gringotts gave the wizarding world a fleeting glimpse of these mysteries. After he, Ron, and Hermione broke into the Lestrange vault, they barely survived the dragon's fire before riding the beast to freedom. Yet in the chaos, Harry later recalled feeling the chill of something watching from the depths. The books do not linger on this sensation, but fan interpretation suggests it may have been one of those rumoured shadows disturbed by the intruder's reckless passage. If true, then Harry's victory was more luck than destiny, for few others had escaped such notice alive. Number 18. Vaults that change their shape. Of all the secrets hidden beneath the streets of Diagon Alley, few inspire as much fascination and dread as the ancient vaults of Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Though the books often described them as long, stone chambers filled with piles of treasure guarded by goblins and dragons, there is a darker, lesser-known truth whispered among historians of magic. Some of the most heavily protected vaults are not fixed in place at all. Instead, their interiors shift like living mazes, rearranging themselves through goblin enchantments so complex that even the oldest wizards could not replicate them. Within these chambers, piles of gold slide across the floor, silver chalices vanish into walls, and the very architecture transforms, creating a labyrinth designed to confound intruders. A treasure hoard in the morning might look entirely different by evening, with staircases leading nowhere and shelves folding into the floor. This dynamic chaos is not a mistake, but a deliberate defense, a reminder that Gringotts is as much a fortress as it is a bank. The history of these shape-shifting vaults is tied to the earliest days of Gringotts' founding, in the 1400s, when goblins first carved their tunnels deep under London. Goblin smiths and enchanters, jealous of their craft and distrustful of wizard clients, sought a way to ensure that no outsider could memorize the layout of a vault. They feared, with good reason, that humans, known in goblin lore for breaking contracts, might one day try to outwit the bank. According to the scholar Batilda Bagshot, these protections relied on charms similar to the ones that make Hogwarts' staircases move. But unlike the castle's youthful unpredictability, Gringotts' magic is deliberate, precise, and hostile to memory itself. A goblin proverb preserved in the book Secrets of Goblin Magic reads, "Gold that stays still is gold that is stolen. Gold that moves is gold that survives." It suggests that the enchantments were not merely protective, but also ideological, reflecting goblin beliefs about ownership. One of the most famous examples of a shifting vault was Vault 394, once leased to the ancient wizarding family of Selwyn. Contemporary records describe how Lord Theobald Selwyn, upon attempting to withdraw a casket of cursed opals, found himself trapped for 3 hours inside his own chamber as the floor stretched into a winding corridor. His lantern revealed piles of treasure in the distance, but whenever he approached, the coins scattered into new alcoves or merged into pillars of stone. He later testified before the Wizengamot that the vault had become a twisting beast of walls and gold in which my family's jewels fled from me like frightened deer. Although Selwyn eventually escaped, he never recovered the casket. Goblins, when questioned, shrugged and claimed that the vault had behaved as intended. The message was clear: ownership meant nothing without goblin cooperation. Even Harry Potter himself, though unaware at the time, encountered hints of these strange defences. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the goblin Griphook warned him that if anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried to rob the high-security vaults, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped inside. This detail suggested not just curses, but shifting interiors designed to swallow thieves. When Hagrid and Harry visited Vault 713, the supposedly empty chamber where the Philosopher's Stone had been hidden, Rowling described it as bare, except for a grubby little package wrapped in brown paper lying on the floor. What she did not mention, but what insiders later revealed, was that this vault too could rearrange itself. The bare stone was deceptive. The treasure was concealed by magic that shifted the room's boundaries, hiding its contents from even the keenest intruder. The goblin's mastery of space has often been compared to the enchanted tents seen at the Quidditch World Cup, where tiny flaps concealed vast interiors. Yet the vault enchantments are far more dangerous. Whereas tents simply expand space, Gringotts vaults twist it. A thief who believes he is stepping toward a pile of coins may suddenly find the floor beneath him collapsing into a chasm of dark stone. Torches flicker out, corridors double back on themselves, and familiar objects vanish. Scholars believe that the walls of these vaults are charmed to forget their own past positions, meaning even an eyewitness account of the layout is useless after a few hours. And this is why generations of witches and wizards spoke in awe of Gringotts as the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except perhaps Hogwarts. The Dumbledore family is said to have faced these enchantments firsthand. After Percival Dumbledore's imprisonment, Albus attempted to recover certain family heirlooms stored deep within Gringotts. According to rumour, he was led to a vault that had belonged to his great-grandfather. The walls shifted, opening into branching halls filled with glittering cabinets, only for those cabinets to melt into rivers of coins. The goblins observed him silently, taking notes, never intervening. Though Albus was one of the greatest wizards of his age, he emerged with little more than a single trinket, a cracked silver mirror. This was perhaps one reason he later chose to entrust certain secrets not to banks, but to his own allies. It is tempting to imagine that these vaults were created merely to deter thieves, but goblin records hint at a darker purpose. Some sources suggest the enchantments are designed to remind wizards of their dependence on goblin magic. Even the rightful owner cannot navigate the labyrinth without assistance, which ensures that goblins remain indispensable. In this sense, the shifting vaults are a political statement, a declaration of goblin superiority. Every vault becomes a metaphorical battlefield where human greed is humbled by goblin craft. One historian, Eldritch Diggory, wrote, "The wizard believes he owns gold, the goblin teaches him he only borrows it." At least one incident proves how perilous the vaults could be. In 1752, a witch named Honoria Nettle, suspected of involvement with dark magic, tried to plunder her own cousin's vault after his death. She broke into Vault 512 with a forged key, but quickly found herself lost in an endless passage of iron doors. Witnesses claim they heard her screams echoing for days, yet when the vault was opened officially by goblins, no trace of her remained. Some believed the vault had absorbed her into its structure. Others suggested she stumbled upon treasures cursed beyond comprehension. Either way, her story circulated as a cautionary tale among ambitious witches for centuries. What makes these vaults particularly frightening is that memory itself becomes unreliable within them. Wizards who spent only minutes inside often emerged unable to sketch the layout they had just seen. It is said that walls shift not only physically but also mentally, clouding the intruder's perception. This aligns with the goblin's philosophy of ownership. What you cannot remember, you cannot steal. Griphook once remarked privately, "It is not the vault that hides the treasure from you. It is the treasure that hides itself." Such words suggest that even the piles of coins and jewels are enchanted to resist recognition, dissolving into different forms whenever they are observed. The Black family, infamous for their obsession with wealth and bloodline purity, maintained one of the largest shifting vaults. When Sirius Black inherited it, he reportedly despised the experience of entering it, describing to a friend that the vault groaned like a living creature with floors that rippled under my feet. He rarely visited, preferring to live off what little treasure he could carry rather than face the nightmare beneath Diagon Alley. This reluctance demonstrates how even the wealthiest wizards found their riches transformed into burdens when bound by goblin enchantments. It is also worth noting how these shifting vaults contrast with other magical protections in the wizarding world. At Hogwarts, enchantments such as the Marauder's Map revealed hidden pathways, showing that even the most secret places could be exposed with clever magic. At Gringotts, however, no map could ever function. A drawing of the vault's interior would be obsolete before the ink dried. The labyrinth not only moved, but seemed to resent being recorded. This resistance to knowledge marks it as one of the most advanced magical defenses ever crafted. During the infamous break-in of 1998, when Harry, Ron and Hermione infiltrated Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, the trio did not experience moving walls, but instead encountered multiplying treasure that burned on touch. Yet many theorists argue that this was only one layer of Gringotts' arsenal. Bellatrix's vault may not have been among those with shifting structures, or the trio may have been spared by Griphook's presence. Still, their adventure hinted at the limitless creativity of goblin curses, and it fueled speculation about what other horrors lay hidden in the depths. What fascinates magical historians is how the enchantments have endured for centuries without collapse. Wizards often struggle to maintain even simple wards for more than a generation, yet goblin magic has preserved vault defenses flawlessly. Some suspect that the shifting architecture is powered by the collective will of goblins who still serve at Gringotts, feeding their resentment and cunning into the walls themselves. Others whisper of ancient runes carved into the bedrock, drawing upon deep earth magic that predates both goblins and men. In either case, it is a reminder that Gringotts is more than a bank. It is a living monument to goblin power, and its shape-shifting vaults are its most mysterious chambers. Perhaps the greatest irony is that these vaults, meant to preserve treasure forever, sometimes prevent its recovery entirely. Wizards have died without heirs because they could not navigate the labyrinth to reclaim their wealth. Families have quarreled over missing heirlooms, blaming goblins for theft, only to be told coldly that the vault keeps what it chooses. It raises a philosophical question. If gold lies forever out of reach, does it still belong to its owner? Or has it become, in some twisted sense, the possession of the vault itself? In the end, the shape-shifting vaults of Gringotts remain a haunting reminder that in the wizarding world, wealth is never entirely secure, and power always demands a price. Number 19. Alchemical Treasures. The marble halls of Gringotts, Wizarding Bank have always carried a weight far greater than the mere clinking of coins. For centuries, wizards whispered of vaults that contained more than gold galleons or treasured heirlooms. They spoke of something older, rarer, and infinitely more dangerous. Caches of alchemical metals collected by Nicolas Flamel and those who studied under him. While the world remembers Flamel for the creation of the Philosopher's Stone and his nearly immortal existence, few pay attention to the quiet suggestion, tucked between lines of history, that much of his work never left the subterranean chambers of Gringotts. The goblins, famed for their secretive stewardship, have long refused to confirm or deny these rumours, which only strengthens the belief that deep in the vaults lie substances no modern wizard could hope to reproduce. In considering the possibility of alchemical treasures, one must recall the obsessive pursuit of metals that could resist corruption, metals believed to resonate with the very forces of creation. The Philosopher's Stone itself was not a myth born in a single night, but the culmination of centuries of failed experiments and dangerous discoveries. Flamel, unlike many of his predecessors, succeeded in perfecting the stone, but the question remains, what did he do with the fragments, with the rejected attempts, with the strange metals born from experiments that skirted the edge of success? Legends claim he delivered them into the custody of Gringotts for safekeeping, convinced that neither wizards nor muggles were ready to handle their powers. If this is true, then somewhere beneath London lies not only a treasury of wealth, but a mausoleum of impossible creations. The story finds fuel in an intriguing connection. When Harry first entered Gringotts in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid revealed that the goblins had been safeguarding a small package from Vault 713 on Dumbledore's orders. "Can't tell you what's in there," Hagrid told him. "Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me. Best not mention it to anyone." That package, of course, contained the Philosopher's Stone itself. But the casual manner in which the goblins protected such an artifact as if it were one of many has given rise to speculation. If one stone could rest within those chambers, could there not also be metals derived from Flamel's centuries of research, stacked in sealed vaults with similar nonchalance? The incident demonstrated the goblins' unflinching ability to guard what others could not even imagine possessing. Some accounts even give names to these supposed alchemical materials. One such metal is referred to as lunarich, a silvery substance more radiant than moonlight and said to bend gravity itself. Another, Eterian, was rumoured to resist all known spells, making it impossible to charm, hex, or enchant. Skeptics dismiss these names as inventions of over-enthusiastic historians, but certain fragments of evidence persist. A manuscript attributed to an obscure French wizard named Guillaume de Varennes, dated around 1420, makes mention of Flamel depositing the residue of his crucibles with guardians who covet metal as dragons covet gold. The guardians, many believe, could only be goblins. If even a shred of this testimony is true, then Gringotts is more than a bank. It is a vault of arcane history itself. The dark interest in Gringotts becomes easier to explain through this lens. The break-in attempt Harry witnessed in his first year, officially recorded as a failure, takes on new significance when one imagines that the intruders were not only after the stone but perhaps the alchemical reserves said to rest nearby. In Philosopher's Stone, the goblins admitted there was an attempt at robbery a few days ago. Nothing was taken. That's what's so strange. Nothing was taken. Why would anyone risk their life to penetrate such a fortress, if not for something truly irreplaceable? Many scholars argue that Voldemort's followers were already searching for traces of Flamel's research, hoping to harness metals that might amplify the Dark Lord's fragmented soul. Gold and silver are abundant. Only the impossible metals of alchemy would justify such recklessness. The goblins' peculiar attitude toward ownership further deepens the mystery. They consider goblin-forged artifacts to belong forever to their makers, regardless of wizarding law. This principle, if applied to Flamel's metals, would mean the goblins see themselves as the rightful custodians of the alchemical treasures, not merely hired bankers. The security charms woven into Gringotts architecture, the multiplying flames, the gem-studded dragons, the impervious vault doors, may have been strengthened not for piles of gold, but to contain substances too volatile to exist unguarded. Imagine a shard of lunarich falling into careless hands. The manipulation of gravity could turn entire battlefields upside down. Imagine a Tyrion in the grasp of a dark wizard. No spell could disarm him. Such possibilities transform the bank into a battlefield waiting to be breached. Nicolas Flamel himself seemed aware of this dangerous legacy. Though J.K. Rowling never reveals extensive details about his final years beyond the destruction of the stone, the books give us a hint of his restraint. In Philosopher's Stone, Dumbledore explained to Harry, "Flamel has enough elixir stored to set his affairs in order, but then yes, he will die." The phrase, "set his affairs in order," is ambiguous but suggestive. If Flamel knew his life was ending, might not part of his affairs include ensuring that the metals, experiments, and dangerous relics of his research were secured? To set affairs could have meant entrusting them permanently to the goblins, confident that their code of secrecy would outlive him by centuries. It was not only immortality he relinquished, but perhaps the last fragments of a knowledge too potent for casual use. The possibility of alchemical caches has led to speculation about specific vaults within the bank. Vault 687, known for belonging to the Lestrange family, once held Helga Hufflepuff's cup, a Horcrux created by Voldemort. If the Dark Lord manipulated his followers to secure such objects, what stopped him from probing deeper, from attempting to learn which vaults contained materials that could defy death itself? Some claim that the ferocity with which Bellatrix Lestrange guarded her vault had less to do with her family treasures and more with rumors that her lineage once dabbled in alchemy, securing strange fragments now long forgotten by wizards. But not by goblins. Harry's frantic escape on the back of the Ukrainian Iron Belly exposed only the tip of an iceberg far larger than anyone suspected. One cannot ignore how the very architecture of Gringotts seems designed to house more than treasure. The endless tunnels, twisting rails, and vast caverns suggest a construction project spanning centuries, perhaps continually expanded as new deposits of magical matter required storage. The deeper one descends, the more hostile the environment becomes. Heat, pressure, and enchantments that defy normal wizarding comprehension guard the oldest vaults. Some historians interpret this as practical protection, while others believe these were environmental necessities, designed to contain metals that would destabilize if exposed to surface air. Thus the bank itself becomes less a financial institution and more an alchemical labyrinth, a subterranean crucible holding what the world should never see. The secrecy surrounding Nicolas Flamel's followers only compounds the mystery. It is well known that alchemy was not a solitary endeavor, but a collaborative science passed between masters and apprentices. While Flamel's name survived history, many of his contemporaries disappeared into obscurity. The suggestion that they deposited fragments of their experiments alongside his is not far-fetched. Take, for instance, the enigmatic Spanish alchemist Diego Balthazar, rumored to have created metals that resonated with Phoenix song. His work vanishes from history after a single note recorded in 1462. Could his creations have joined? Flamel's in Gringotts? Goblins have always thrived on acquisition, and securing such relics would have only increased their power over wizarding society. The existence of these alchemical caches also offers an explanation for the goblins' strained relationship with wizards. While disputes over wand ownership and goblin-made artifacts are well documented, there lingers a suspicion that wizards covet the deeper vaults far more than they admit. If rumors of a Tyrion or lunarich reached the ears of the ministry, attempts to seize such metals would be inevitable. Perhaps this explains why goblins have never hesitated to remind wizards that breaking trust with Gringotts would be disastrous. They are not merely protecting clients' gold, but safeguarding weapons of unimaginable scale. And that once those metals are unleashed, no wizarding law could restore balance. Consider, too, the alignment of events during Voldemort's rise to power. Each attempt to infiltrate Gringotts corresponded with rumors of dark experiments and new spells. When the Dark Lord's forces spread terror, what if their true aim was less about domination and more about acquisition? The robbery attempt Hagrid mentioned, the Lestrange Vault, the obsession with ancient artifacts all point toward a pattern. Voldemort may have sought not just Horcruxes or cursed relics, but alchemical matter that could ensure his supremacy. He failed, but not for lack of trying. The interest of dark wizards in Gringotts was never about money. It was about metals that could rewrite the rules of magic itself. If one accepts these stories, then Harry Potter's many encounters with Gringotts take on a different shade of meaning. The boy who lived did not merely step into a bank on his first trip to Diagon Alley. He unknowingly crossed the threshold of one of the greatest alchemical vaults in wizarding history. His presence there, guided by Hagrid and later pursued by Death Eaters, intersects with the oldest secrets of magical civilization. Every rattle of the cart, every torchlit cavern, becomes not just a scene of wonder, but a backdrop to a centuries-old struggle for the preservation or exploitation of Nicholas Flamel's legacy. The mystery remains sealed, but the whispers continue, ensuring that the fascination with Gringotts will never fade. Number 20. Marble with a Secret. Under the pale morning light of Diagon Alley, Gringotts' wizarding bank always seemed to gleam with a brilliance that no ordinary building could possess. The facade of white marble, polished smooth and towering with an austere grandeur, was not merely for show. Wizards and witches walking past it rarely questioned why this ancient structure appeared so untouched by time or chaos, but the truth lay hidden within the very stone itself. The marble was not natural, at least not in the sense Muggle architects would understand. It was enchanted centuries ago with a secret that ensured Gringotts remained the most secure building in the wizarding world, save perhaps for Hogwarts itself. The goblins who managed Gringotts knew well that security was not a matter of strong locks or sturdy walls alone. Their enchantments extended into the very skin of the building. The white marble of the exterior had been laced with charms of such complexity that even the most skilled curse breakers of modern times could not hope to unravel them. The enchantment gave the marble an unusual property. It reflected any dark magic cast upon it. If a wizard attempted to unleash a curse or hex directly against the building, the magic would rebound instantly, striking its caster with equal or greater force. It was not merely defense, it was a form of judgment. Those who sought to harm Gringotts found themselves undone by their own power. This curious fact remained largely unknown to the average visitor. Most people marveled at the marbled, spotless glow, assuming it was the result of obsessive goblin cleaning or polish. In reality, no dust, soot, or scorch mark could cling to the stone because of the enchantment. Even during the Second Wizarding War, when chaos swept through Diagon Alley and shops bore scars of spells and fire, Gringotts stood untouched. The white marble reflected not only magical attacks, but also carried an aura that dissuaded vandals. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, J.K. Rowling describes the bank as a snowy white building that towered over the other little shops. That snowy whiteness was not cosmetic, it was a constant reminder of the goblins' mastery of protective craft. Legends circulated quietly among historians of magic that the marble used for Gringotts came from a hidden quarry in the Scottish Highlands. This quarry, it was said, was discovered by Ragnuk I, the same goblin who forged Godric Gryffindor's sword. Ragnuk and his kin were not merely smiths of metal, but artisans of stone. The blocks of marble they unearthed were bound with ancient goblin curses and wards, then refined with wizarding magic. The fusion of goblin craft and wizard enchantment made the stone utterly unique, a hybrid creation that blurred the lines between natural mineral and magical artifact. Unlike common marble, which can erode under weather or crack under stress, this stone seemed almost alive, pulsing faintly with protective energy. The goblins did not rely on secrecy alone. They were cunning enough to spread rumors of dragons guarding the lower vaults, of enchanted keys, of deadly enchantments in the tunnels. These were true enough, but they served another purpose, to distract from the real secret sitting in plain sight. The marble facade was the first and most important defense. While most intruders dreamed of breaking into the underground vaults, none ever considered that the greatest risk came before one even crossed the threshold. It was the perfect goblin strategy: conceal power within beauty, and no one suspects until it is too late. There is one tale, buried deep in the archives of the Ministry of Magic, about a dark wizard named Morfin Yaxley, who tested the bank's defences in the 18th century. Yaxley, obsessed with gold and ancient relics, attempted to bring down the main entrance with a blasting curse of terrifying magnitude. Eyewitnesses claimed that the marble shimmered like water for a brief moment before the curse rebounded. Yaxley was found unconscious, thrown across Diagon Alley with his own wand shattered into splinters. His magic had turned against him, and he spent the remainder of his life a broken man, both in body and in mind. The goblins never confirmed this event, but the story persisted, whispered by those who enjoyed retelling cautionary tales about greed and arrogance. The case of Yaxley was not the only whispered account. Another example came much later, during Voldemort's rise. When the Dark Lord gained control of the Ministry, few places in Britain dared to stand openly against his power, yet Gringotts did not fall. Voldemort's forces infiltrated, but they never dared mount a direct assault on the structure itself. Bellatrix Lestrange's vault may have been compromised from within through deception and Polyjuice Potion, but the exterior walls remained inviolate. Even Voldemort, who arrogantly believed himself master of death and magic, did not attempt to strike Gringotts with a curse. Perhaps he knew the consequences, or perhaps the goblin's silent confidence deterred him. In either case, the marble's enchantment succeeded. It never once allowed an enemy to bring war to its doors. Harry himself, though unaware of the marble's secret, witnessed its uncanny resilience. During the break-in of 1998, when he, Ron, and Hermione escaped from the vaults on the back of a dragon, chaos erupted in the main hall. Spells fired wildly as goblins and wizards clashed, yet the marble columns stood pristine, untouched by the magical barrage. Even Griphook, who betrayed them, could not conceal a flicker of awe as the hall remained intact, despite the violence. Readers may recall the description in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. The goblins ran for cover, some diving under counters, others streaking for doorways, yet the building did not shudder or crack, even as curses ricocheted around the chamber. What the text leaves unsaid is that the ricochet was no accident. It was the marble itself deflecting hostile energy. The reflective property of the marble went beyond mere defense. For scholars of magic, it raised profound questions about the nature of enchantments. Reflection implied awareness, as if the stone could distinguish between intent and neutrality. Non-harmful charms like Lumos or simple cleaning spells passed through without incident, yet curses rebounded with deadly accuracy. The marble seemed to recognize malice. Some speculated that the goblins infused the stone with fragments of runic consciousness, binding it to an ancient pact that protected treasure and punished greed. Others believed the enchantments were woven with blood. Magic, ancient and irreversible. No consensus was ever reached, but all agreed that meddling with the stone was unwise. The goblins, characteristically secretive, never admitted the truth. When asked, they would simply state that Gringotts was secure beyond measure. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed," read the inscription above the doors in the first book. It was a warning layered with double meaning. Most assumed it referred to the vaults and their traps. In truth, it was equally applicable to the very building itself. The sin of greed, manifesting in curses or attacks, was punished instantly by the marble's unforgiving reflection. For everyday wizards, the existence of such protection became a kind of subconscious comfort. Parents took their children past the white building as though showing them a monument of permanence in a world of shifting allegiances. Shopkeepers in Diagon Alley measured their own safety by proximity to the bank, convinced that no real devastation could ever begin so close to Gringotts. Even Aurors quietly admitted that the bank was an anchor of stability. During times of unrest, its untouched facade reassured them that order could still be maintained. The marble's secret had one ironic effect. It made Gringotts the safest place not only for wealth, but also for ideas. Some historians argue that this was why figures like Albus Dumbledore kept certain documents hidden in the vaults rather than in Hogwarts. Dumbledore, after all, understood magic better than most, and he trusted the goblins' silent guardianship. He knew that no Death Eater would dare test their spells against that marble wall. Though Rowling never explicitly confirms this, the pattern is undeniable. Gringotts, unlike any other building in Britain, remained untouched by war's destruction. Perhaps the greatest testament to the marble's secret was its silence. Centuries of wizarding history unfolded in chaos, wars, rebellions, the fall of Dark Lords, and yet Gringotts never fell. The building never needed to boast of its power. The marble gleamed quietly, reflecting not just sunlight, but the arrogance of those who would challenge it. In its smooth surface, enemies saw themselves undone before they could even strike. That is the paradox of Gringotts, a bank founded on distrust and guarded by creatures famed for their suspicion, nevertheless stood as the most trustworthy stronghold in the wizarding world. To walk past the marble today is to pass a silent warning written in stone. Wizards may forget, goblins may refuse to speak, and books may omit the truth, but the marble remembers. Every time it turns back a spell, it preserves the unbroken history of Gringotts. That history is not only of golden vaults, but of a building whose very skin protects it with an ancient, merciless justice. For those who have studied its legend, the message is unmistakable. The white marble of Gringotts is more than decoration. It is a shield, a mirror, and a judge, silently ensuring that greed and malice always devour themselves. Number 21. Goblin script on the walls. The marble floors of Gringotts echo with every step, yet few visitors pause to notice the carvings that run along the high walls. They shimmer faintly when torches flicker, twisting like flowing runes. Many wizards believe these are purely decorative, yet those who linger long enough feel a strange heaviness in the air, as though the symbols themselves breathe with a hidden magic. Goblins, with their sharp eyes and even sharper secrets, have never explained the meaning of these writings, leaving generations of witches and wizards to speculate. Griphook once smirked when a young wizard dared to ask what they said, replying only with silence, which perhaps revealed more than words could. The carvings are not ordinary wizarding runes. They resemble no system studied at Hogwarts in ancient runes with Bathsheba babbling. Hermione Granger, always alert to symbols, noticed faint inscriptions during her first visit to Gringotts in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, though Rowling does not elaborate in detail. Scholars of the wizarding world have suggested these may be written in the Goblin tongue, a language almost entirely closed to outsiders. According to the book Magical Hieroglyphs and Logograms, the Goblin language contains layers of meaning that cannot be translated without understanding the culture behind them. To a human eye, the script may look like a pattern of hooks and jagged lines, but to goblins it is alive with power. One theory holds that the walls themselves are enchanted through these words. The goblins, distrustful of wizards and their thirst for power, would hardly rely solely on spells known to everyone. Instead, they could weave their ancestral magic into stone, creating a defense no wizard would dare tamper with. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed," reads the warning poem Harry saw above the silver doors. Many believe that inscription is only the surface, Beyond the public rhyme lies a deeper code etched into the very walls, binding the bank's fortune to the Goblin nation. It is not coincidence that Gringotts has never fallen into complete ruin despite numerous break-in attempts. Consider the infamous break-in of 1991 when Quirinus Quirrell, under Voldemort's influence, tried to steal the Philosopher's Stone. The vault in question was emptied just in time, but what remains forgotten is that Quirrell never got past the outer levels. Accounts suggest that the walls of the bank glowed faintly during his attempt as though the Goblin runes were activated. This observation was later recorded in Defensive Enchantments of Financial Institutions, a lesser-known academic journal. The author, Rodolphus Cresswell, claimed that the inscriptions function like a detection system, alerting goblins of intruders even before alarms are sounded. Whether this is true or not, no goblin has confirmed or denied it. Hermione, ever curious, later tried to research goblin scripts during her time in the Hogwarts library. She admitted to Harry and Ron that she could find next to nothing on the subject, and what little existed was highly censored. Goblins guard their secrets as fiercely as they guard their gold, she remarked. Indeed, goblin silver itself, capable of absorbing magical properties, may have been inscribed with similar runes at the moment of forging. The idea that the very walls of Gringotts were inscribed during its construction centuries ago suggests that the bank is less a building and more a living fortress, humming with ancient enchantments invisible to most. Specific examples of goblin writing extend beyond Gringotts. The Sword of Gryffindor, a goblin-made masterpiece, was famously imbued with properties that allowed it to absorb that which strengthened it. When Harry pulled the sword from the sorting hat in the Chamber of Secrets, no one noticed that along the blade's hilt faint markings glowed in firelight. These, scholars suggest, may have been goblin inscriptions similar to those in Gringotts. The connection raises a question. If goblins used script to empower weapons, why would they not use the same script to shield their treasure vaults? This parallel cannot be ignored, for both the sword and the bank stand as enduring symbols of goblin craftsmanship. It is important to recall that wizards rarely learn goblin language in depth. Barty Crouch Sr. was one of the few fluent speakers, and even he struggled to maintain diplomatic trust with goblins. Bill Weasley, employed by Gringotts as a curse-breaker, admitted in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire that goblins rarely shared their internal customs. Bill once mentioned that underground vaults were layered with enchantments no wizard could ever replicate. What he did not mention, but later suggested to his brother Charlie in a private letter, was that strange writings on the walls seemed to hum when touched. If true, this implies that the goblin script itself is enchanted, not merely symbolic. The emotional effect of these inscriptions should not be underestimated. Visitors often report a chill down their spine when waiting in the Grand Hall, particularly near the far columns, where the script is most dense. The faint grooves catch the light like veins of silver, and some swear they shift subtly when no one is looking. This psychological intimidation may itself be deliberate. Goblins understand fear as a form of control, and the thought that the very walls are watching is enough to discourage mischief. One wizard, Edric Prowse, once wrote that he felt the walls breathing during a visit in 1978. His letter, preserved in the archives of the Daily Prophet, was dismissed as nonsense at the time, but after the 1998 break-in by Harry, Ron and Hermione, his words seem less far-fetched. During that daring raid to retrieve Helga Hufflepuff's cup, the trio witnessed firsthand the depth of Gringotts' enchantments. The multiplying treasure in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault was one form of protection, but observers noted something stranger. As the dragon burst through the tunnels, parts of the carved walls appeared to glow red, like veins of fire. Some believed this was the goblin script activating in distress, warning that the bank's deepest taboos had been violated. That the trio escaped alive was more miracle than design, and many argue that only the chaos of Voldemort's war allowed them to succeed where others failed. There is also the possibility that these inscriptions are linked to the goblin's own spiritual or religious traditions. While little is known about goblin faith, some historians suggest they worship concepts of ownership and craftsmanship. If so, the script on the walls may be more than magic, it may be prayer. Just as wizards carve runes into wands or amulets for luck, goblins may carve words into stone to bind their gods or ancestors to their side. In this sense, Gringotts is both a bank and a temple, where every coin is protected not only by law, but by divine craft. Albus Dumbledore, always a step ahead in understanding the arcane, hinted at this in his private notes. In a letter discovered after his death, he mentioned an ancient binding carved in Gringotts' walls older than the ministry itself. Though vague, the letter suggests he believed the bank's strength lay not in goblin numbers, but in their ancestral pacts. Dumbledore's recognition of goblin artistry, particularly in his respect for goblin-forged silver, aligns with this theory. He knew that language, when carved into matter, could be stronger than spells cast with a wand. The secrecy surrounding goblin script ensures that wizarding society remains dependent on goblins for secure banking. Wizards may hold political power, but their fortunes rest in vaults, sealed by words they cannot read. This imbalance of knowledge gives goblins leverage that no law can undermine. Wizards may rule the ministry, one goblin proverb goes, but goblins rule the vaults. If the script truly fuels Gringotts' enchantments, then every wizard who stores gold there is under silent contract with goblin tradition. Yet questions remain. If the inscriptions are indeed protective, why have goblins never revealed this openly? Some argue that revealing the power would invite attempts to break it. Others believe secrecy is power in itself. What is certain is that these carvings are not meaningless scratches. They are older than any ministry regulation, older than the vaults themselves, and perhaps even older than Wizarding London. Each curve and angle may hold layers of protection, waiting to awaken should anyone dare betray the trust of Gringotts. The thought lingers with every visitor who steps inside. The walls are more than walls, they are keepers of a language hidden in plain sight. Wizards pass by without knowing, while goblins smirk with quiet satisfaction. Somewhere between those jagged lines lies a story untold, a spell unbroken, and a truth that binds wizard and goblin alike. In Gringotts, gold is not merely guarded by locks and dragons, but by the living words of an ancient race who carved their power into stone, ensuring that no thief, no dark lord, and no wizardly arrogance can ever strip them of their mastery. Number 22. Secret Cursed Vaults. Of all the mysteries surrounding the wizarding world, few places inspire such equal measures of awe and dread as Gringotts' Wizarding Bank. The gleaming marble hall, the endless rows of goblin tellers, the twisting subterranean passages leading deep beneath London, all of it presents an image of wealth and impenetrable security. Yet beneath that polished surface lies a darker legend, whispered among witches and wizards who claim to know the hidden truths. There are vaults in Gringotts that no one dares to open, vaults sealed not only with locks and curses but with silence itself. They are sometimes called the Cursed Vaults, places where goblins supposedly bury objects too perilous to be touched. The reputation of Gringotts as the most secure place in the wizarding world after Hogwarts comes not just from its enchanted doors or dragon guardians. It comes from the fear of what lies hidden below. We know from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that Hagrid warned Harry about the dangers within. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts. That statement hints not only at security but at a darker form of protection, one that might mean imprisonment rather than safekeeping. Objects deposited in the deepest vaults are not always treasures of gold and jewels. Some are items that seem too cursed to remain in the open world. Consider Vault 719, the vault that held the Philosopher's Stone for a brief time under Dumbledore's request. It was not a family vault nor a permanent chamber for treasures. It was chosen because of its impenetrable wards. When Harry saw it, the vault was empty. the stone already moved to Hogwarts for greater safety. Yet the incident demonstrated something crucial. Gringotts is trusted not just with fortunes, but with items that could unbalance the very world if they fell into the wrong hands. This one example is officially documented in the series, but many believe there are similar vaults, untouched for centuries, their contents far more sinister. Rumours have long circulated that the goblins themselves imposed bans on certain vaults. In wizarding taverns, one sometimes hears speculation about chambers sealed after their owners perished, with no heir daring to claim what was left behind. The Malfoy family, for instance, is known for its collection of dark objects, many confiscated after the Second Wizarding War. It is whispered that not all of those items were destroyed. Some may have been hidden away in Gringotts, not because the goblins wished to protect them, but because no one else could afford to contain their malignant power. What makes these stories terrifying is not the possibility of hidden treasure, but the nature of cursed magic itself. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore explained how objects could be imbued with lasting enchantments that twist and corrupt anyone who handles them. The locket of Salazar Slytherin turned into a Horcrux by Voldemort is a prime example of such corruption. Although the locket was never known to rest in Gringotts, the very existence of Horcruxes fuels the belief that goblins may have encountered similar artifacts in their long history. If the Ministry feared to destroy them, where else could they have gone but to the depths of the Wizarding Bank? There is an old story, passed along in hushed tones, of a vault sealed in the early 1700s after a customer attempted to store a mirror rumoured to speak prophecies of death. The goblins allegedly lost 3 of their kind when trying to close the vault, their minds shattered by the mirror's voice. Whether true or not, the tale reflects the belief that Gringotts functions not only as a bank, but as a kind of prison. Some artifacts cannot be destroyed, and so they must be locked away, guarded by enchantments so ancient even the goblins do not fully understand them anymore. The secrecy of the goblins only heightens the mystery. When asked, they provide no answers, turning away with their characteristic cold disdain. Their refusal is telling because goblins are not usually known for hiding their pride in the bank's security. That silence leaves space for legends to grow. Wizards wonder whether beneath the dragons and stalactites lie corridors no wizard has walked in centuries, doors crusted with dust, and wards humming with ancient malice. It is not unreasonable to imagine that such corridors exist, given what we know about the labyrinthine depth of the vault system. The escape of Harry, Ron, and Hermione from Bellatrix Lestrange's vault in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows also feeds these suspicions. That vault alone was rigged with Gemino and Flagrante curses, spells that multiplied and burned anything touched. If a known family vault carried such protections, what horrors might be waiting in those chambers deliberately hidden from history? Bellatrix's vault contained Hufflepuff's cup, another Horcrux, proof that Gringotts has indeed sheltered the most dangerous items in wizarding history. The goblins may have known or suspected, but they guarded the secret all the same. One cannot overlook the symbolism of dragons within this conversation. Dragons guard only the oldest and most important vaults deep beneath the earth. Their very placement suggests that the goblins acknowledge there are vaults beyond ordinary human control. Harry's encounter with the pale, half-blind dragon reveals how much the goblins rely on raw, destructive guardianship rather than trust in human wizardry. A dragon is not just a guard for gold, it is a sentinel for something the goblins themselves fear. Legends among Hogwarts students once told of cursed vaults beneath the castle, a story revived in later tales of the wizarding world. Some scholars have argued that these student stories might have been inspired by real whispers about Gringotts. The idea that some vaults are never to be entered, that ancient wards could drive intruders mad, is a frightening echo. If even Hogwarts bred myths of cursed storage rooms, what then of the bank, whose sole purpose is to keep dangerous objects out of reach? Historical records of goblin rebellions hint at confiscated wands, blades, and amulets that vanished after battles. Wizards assumed they were destroyed, but rebel chronicles preserved by goblin families tell another story, that many were dragged deep into Gringotts, never to emerge. This suggests a long-standing practice of sealing away objects neither side could safely control. The bank thus becomes not merely a financial institution, but a burial ground for magic too wild to be mastered. There is also the question of ownership. When a vault is closed and cursed, does anyone technically own its contents? Some argue that the goblins claim possession, using secrecy as leverage against the wizarding world. Others insist that the vaults are neutral zones, sanctified by ancient contracts that prevent either side from interfering. Regardless, the uncertainty allows legends to thrive. In every telling, Gringotts becomes less a bank and more a shadowed archive, where forbidden magic slumbers. The thought of what might lie in those vaults is chilling. Could there be another Horcrux never revealed, perhaps created by some long-forgotten dark wizard centuries before Voldemort? Could there be relics of Morgana Le Fay or curses crafted in the time of Merlin? Every possibility adds to the sense that Gringotts is both protector and prisoner. Its marble counters are the facade, its heart is a dungeon where magic that should never touch daylight waits in silence. Even Hagrid's offhand words carry new meaning in this light. He told Harry, "If ye were looking for summit, there'd be no safer place. Not unless it's Hogwarts." The implication is not just safety from thieves, but safety from the world itself. Items hidden in Gringotts are not merely safe, they are sealed away to keep the wizarding world safe from them. That subtle difference changes how we understand the institution. It is not only a fortress of gold, but a vault of shadows. For all the glamour of wizarding finance, the true secret of Gringotts may be its silent role as the warden of cursed artifacts. The goblins never confirm it, the ministry never speaks of it, and the vault doors remain unopened. Yet every whispered story, every strange disappearance of dangerous objects, every legend of goblins who vanished sealing a chamber, all of it points to a truth darker than most dare to acknowledge. Gringotts may not only protect fortunes, but guard the world from relics that could unravel it. And perhaps that is why its marble floors gleam so coldly, because beneath them lies a prison deeper than any Azkaban, one without screams, only silence. Number 23, illusions instead of real halls. The Wizarding Bank of Gringotts has always stood as one of the most mysterious and heavily guarded places in the wizarding world, its reputation built on centuries of secrecy and enchantments beyond the comprehension of most witches and wizards. Visitors who descend into its torch-lit corridors, riding the rattling carts through seemingly endless tunnels, usually believe they are seeing a straightforward labyrinth of vaults and chambers. Yet hidden within the stones of the bank lies a truth few outside the goblin race ever consider. Not all of those chambers exist. Some of them are elaborate magical illusions, traps designed to mislead intruders into wandering forever through phantom halls and endless piles of treasure that shimmer enticingly but vanish at a touch. The existence of such illusions fits perfectly with the goblin's reputation for cunning. Known throughout the wizarding world as both shrewd and suspicious, goblins have historically distrusted witches and wizards, believing them inclined to exploit goblin craftsmanship while refusing to acknowledge goblin ownership of created objects. What better reflection of this mistrust than a banking system where not even the corridors can be taken at face value? These illusions are not casual spells thrown up as afterthoughts. They are layers of complex enchantment woven into the very structure of the bank, renewed over centuries, and modified as intruders found ways to counter old tricks. It is said that a goblin entering one of these false halls can, with a single whispered word, collapse the illusion into nothingness, while a wizard without such knowledge might spend days wandering and find himself back where he started, exhausted and no closer to the true vaults. The potency of these illusions is hinted at indirectly in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when Hagrid warns Harry that Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts. That confidence does not rest only on dragons or high-security vault doors. It rests on the certainty that even if someone were to sneak past the guards and slip into the depths of the bank, what awaited them might not be real. Goblins count on intruders' greed, the illusion of mountains of gold is more effective than any wall. Wizards desperate to fill their hands might never notice that the piles they clutch are weightless, or that the passageways they walk continue endlessly without bringing them any closer to their true prize. An oft-whispered example among goblins concerns an attempted theft in the early 1800s. A group of dark wizards, led by a man named Eldrick Tross, tried to break into the bank seeking ancient goblin-forged swords believed to be stored in a high-security vault. They disabled several enchantments, even managing to coerce a former Gringotts cart driver into helping them navigate the outer passages. But once inside, they entered what seemed to be a vast hall lined with ornate chests, golden goblets, and dazzling gems that glimmered even. In the dark, the thieves believed they had succeeded. Yet, as they carried treasure toward the exit, the hall itself shifted, walls folded in upon them, new doors opened, and the thieves were herded like cattle through a maze that had no end. Days later, goblin guards found them unconscious near the surface, raving about corridors that sang in whispers and coins that turned into ashes when touched. Their punishment was swift, but the legend of their failure circulated widely, reinforcing the bank's aura of impenetrability. The illusions are not merely defensive barriers, they are works of artistry. Goblins are renowned for their craftsmanship in metal and stone, and that same meticulous attention extends to enchantment. The phantom rooms are often indistinguishable from the real thing. Stone feels cool to the touch, doors creak on their hinges, and torches flicker with convincing warmth. To the untrained eye, there is nothing to suggest that the chamber one stands in does not exist. This perfection is crucial because the smallest inconsistency could betray the trick. A wizard who suspects deception might attempt counter-charms or probing spells, and while goblins trust in their superiority, they take no chances. It is said that some illusions even adapt to the minds of those who enter them, presenting visions tailored to their desires, ensuring that the victim remains ensnared by his own greed or fear. J.K. Rowling herself never directly names these phantom vaults in the books, but her descriptions provide tantalizing hints. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Griphook descend to Bellatrix Lestrange's vault, the narrative emphasizes confusion and danger. The door melted away, revealing steps leading downward and a dungeon-like room with towering shelves. But the moment Harry laid a hand on a cup, the objects nearest it burst into flame and multiplied. Though this particular scene centers on the Gemino and Flagrante curses, it underscores the idea that Gringotts is layered with tricks that distort reality. What appears real shifts in an instant, leaving the intruder helpless. Readers who know of the goblin's penchant for illusion may interpret such moments as part of a broader network of magical deception within the bank. Illusions also play into the psychological warfare that goblins wage against intruders. Fear and confusion are often more effective than brute force. A dragon may terrify, but it is predictable. One can study its patterns, discover its weaknesses. An illusion, however, attacks the mind. Imagine a witch wandering a hall where the faces of her loved ones appear in portraits, calling to her, urging her forward. She would be lost not only physically but emotionally, ensnared by memories that are nothing but fabrications. Rumors among older goblins suggest that at least one of the illusory chambers is designed precisely this way, an endless hall of portraits, each calling to the intruder by name. Whether or not this is true, the concept aligns with the goblin's philosophy that deception can be stronger than any weapon. A crucial aspect of these illusions is that they are not designed to harm but to prevent theft. Gringotts operates as a bank, and customers, even wealthy ones like the Malfoys, must feel secure visiting. If too many deaths occurred within the walls, questions would be raised in the wizarding community. Thus, illusions serve as a way of repelling intruders without creating scandal. The thieves exhaust themselves chasing ghosts, but they rarely die unless they provoke other, more aggressive protections. This balance between safety and menace ensures that Gringotts maintains its reputation without alienating clients who might fear becoming collateral damage. The exclusivity of knowledge about these illusions adds another layer to Goblin power. Wizards who work with the bank are never told the full extent of its magical defenses. Even trusted vault holders remain ignorant. Griphook's assistance to Harry in Deathly Hallows underscores this secrecy. He knows things Harry does not, and he relishes his advantage. The goblins of Gringotts will not be made fools of, he tells them, and the statement gains deeper meaning when one considers that entire false wings of the bank exist solely to make intruders fools in the most literal sense. Griphook embodies the goblins' determination to maintain control over their domain, and illusions are the ultimate expression of that control. The enchantments themselves are said to be powered by ancient goblin magic, older than Hogwarts itself. Unlike the spells taught to young witches and wizards, these illusions are woven into the structure of the tunnels. Removing one would require dismantling entire sections of rock, a feat nearly impossible without collapsing the bank above. This permanence ensures that each generation of goblin inherits not only the wealth stored in the vaults, but the secrets of keeping them safe. Oral tradition plays a role, whispered incantations never written passed from one goblin to another. To human eyes, the enchantments appear eternal, unchanging, but within the goblin community there is a constant renewal, a vigilance against time and decay. Interestingly, the existence of illusory vaults also explains inconsistencies in how the bank appears to visitors. Harry's cart ride in Philosopher's Stone is dizzying, filled with sharp turns and sudden drops, so much so that he is utterly disoriented by the time he reaches his vault. Readers may ask why such an elaborate system of tracks is necessary, but the answer lies in misdirection. The more confused the passenger, the less likely they are to notice that some doors lead nowhere, that some chambers passed along the way are not built from stone, but from enchantment. Even vault holders are subject to this trickery, ensuring that no one outside the goblins ever builds a reliable map of the bank. The illusions also reflect goblin attitudes toward ownership and theft. To them, every object has a rightful master, and possession does not end with sale. Wizards may believe they own a goblin-made sword, but goblins consider themselves its eternal guardians. In this worldview, illusions serve as a moral trap. Those who try to take what is not theirs find themselves chasing shadows, punished not by force but by futility. The thieves leave empty-handed, their ambition mocked by the very air they breathed. It is a form of poetic justice in which the punishment mirrors the crime. One of the most chilling accounts tied to these illusions comes from a story told among goblins about a young wizard named Corvin Aster, who attempted to find his family's fortune without their permission. He slipped into Gringotts under cover of darkness and was soon lost in a hall filled with endless doors, each bearing his family crest. He opened door after door, believing he was close, but each room led back into the hall again. When he finally gave up, he found himself standing before goblin guards who had been watching the whole time. He was released, unharmed, but his reputation was ruined. The goblins' point was clear. They could trap him whenever they wished, and they wanted him to live with the shame of failure. Ultimately, the illusions of Gringotts are more than clever spells. They are an expression of the goblins' philosophy, their mistrust of humans, and their determination to guard what they value most. The phantom halls are symbols of power, secrets hidden beneath London's streets that remind every visitor that in the world of magic, appearances can never be trusted. As readers, we may marvel at dragons and enchanted doors, but the most formidable weapon of all is the one that cannot be touched. The illusion that makes thieves believe they have already won, when in truth they have only lost themselves. Number 24. Vaults bound to blood. Gringotts has always been painted as the most secure place in the wizarding world, second only to Hogwarts itself. Yet what most readers tend to remember are the goblins, the cart rides, and the dragons. What lies beneath the surface, however, is a far more unsettling truth about its enchanted vaults. Among the layers of protective charms and ancient wards are certain vaults bound not merely by keys or goblin control, but by the blood of the rightful owner. This fact, obscure and rarely mentioned outside hushed whispers, reveals just how terrifyingly personal Gringotts' security measures could be. Blood in the magical universe has always been a symbol of identity, legacy, and power. To tie a vault to blood was to ensure that no thief, no matter how skilled or ruthless, could impersonate or deceive the enchantments. It meant that the vault itself recognized the very essence of its master, and it meant disaster for anyone who dared try otherwise. The blood wards placed on these vaults were not a mere deterrent, but a magical contract woven into the very stone of the bank. If an outsider attempted to force entry, the vault's defenses could be triggered instantly, ranging from severe magical burns to the total collapse of a wizard's ability to channel magic ever again. The goblins, fiercely protective of their craftsmanship, never explained how these enchantments were woven, nor who first demanded their use. But one can trace the echoes of this practice in how goblins spoke of wizard clients with a mixture of contempt and grudging respect. For the goblins, blood-bound vaults were proof that even the proudest witches and wizards feared betrayal, not just from enemies, but sometimes even from their own kin. Trust in Gringotts was not about trusting goblins alone, it was about trusting that blood itself could never lie. Consider the vault of the Black family, long whispered to contain objects too dark and dangerous for the light of day. Though the series never explicitly described its wards in full detail, the family's obsession with blood purity makes it difficult to imagine they would tolerate anything less than blood-binding magic protecting their treasure. The Blacks, who erased the names of traitors from their family tree, were obsessed with the idea that only their bloodline should endure. If their Gringotts vault had been touched by an outsider, it would not be unreasonable to believe that such a vault would have retaliated with fierce, almost sentient wrath. The enchantments of these vaults, after all, were not simply mechanical locks. They reflected the identity of their owners, and the goblins designed them to exact punishment with poetic cruelty. The best example, however, comes from the Lestrange vault, which Harry, Ron, and Hermione infiltrated in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. The Lestranges were among the darkest of Voldemort's followers, their vault containing Helga Hufflepuff's cup, later revealed to be one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. When the trio entered, disguised under Polyjuice Potion, the vault responded not with silence, but with an immediate assault. As Rowling writes, the moment the first object was touched, it multiplied, and burning hot copies showered from above. This enchantment was known as the Gemino curse, combined with a flagrante curse, ensuring that any intruder would be crushed and burned alive under mountains of molten treasure. Though the book does not state it outright, many scholars of the series interpret this to be a variation of blood recognition magic. The vault recognized that those inside were not true Lestranges, and it punished them accordingly. It was less about identifying faces and more about sensing essence that blood itself carries. Blood-based vaults, in contrast to curses like Gemino or Flagrante, are more intimate and final. They do not rely on an object's reaction, but on the very act of entry. When Bill Weasley, a cursebreaker for Gringotts, described the bank's dangers, he emphasized the goblins' merciless designs. There are enchantments placed on the oldest vaults to make sure no wizarding trick can fool them, he told Harry in Goblet of Fire, though Rowling never spelled out The precise words this statement aligns chillingly well with the idea of blood wards. A vault that rejects polyjuice, glamours, or even metamorph magi can only rely on something immutable: blood. Goblins, who considered blood to be the truest mark of ownership, exploited that principle in ways that frightened even the boldest thieves. One cannot help but notice the symbolism of such enchantments. Blood in the wizarding world has often represented destiny and belonging. Lily Potter's sacrifice, rooted in blood magic, protected Harry for years. Voldemort's obsession with using Harry's blood during his resurrection ritual reinforced this theme. Gringott's bloodbound vaults are an echo of this ancient belief, turned not to love or sacrifice but to property and greed. It is no coincidence that some of the darkest families insisted on such measures. In their eyes, their gold, heirlooms and artifacts were extensions of their veins and lineage. To protect them with blood was to ensure continuity of power, binding not just wealth but family identity to the vault's enchantments. The consequences for breaking into such a vault were horrifying. Historical whispers in wizarding folklore tell of would-be thieves who emerged from Gringotts not with treasure but with their magic burned out of them, their wands nothing more than sticks in their hands. Others were said to vanish entirely, consumed by enchantments that devoured magical signatures like predators. The goblins never confirmed these tales, but they also never denied them. What they did confirm, through their silence and sharp-toothed smiles, was that Gringotts' reputation as the safest place in the wizarding world was not an exaggeration. It was, in fact, a warning. It is fascinating to contrast Harry's own modest vault, number 687, with the blood-bound fortresses of ancient wizarding families. Harry's vault opened easily enough with a goblin's key, but perhaps that was because his inheritance was straightforward, without the paranoia of centuries of family intrigue. Yet even in his case, blood played a hidden role. Dumbledore himself had acted as the one who ensured Harry's inheritance passed legally and magically into his name. This quiet administrative act demonstrates how even vaults without explicit blood wards still relied in the end on recognition of ownership tied to lineage. Gringotts. Magic, after all, could never be completely fooled. Keys opened doors but blood sealed fates. When considering the destruction of Gringotts' reputation during the break-in of 1998, one must remember that the trio's daring escape did not invalidate the power of these vaults. They succeeded only because of extraordinary circumstances: Harry's rare connection to Voldemort, Griphook's insider knowledge, and the desperate chaos of a collapsing wizarding war. No ordinary witch or wizard could have survived what they did. Their escape on the back of a dragon was a singular event, not a sign of weakness in the bank's enchantments. If anything, the horrors they endured in the Lestrange vault reaffirmed the idea that blood-bound protections were never meant to be overcome by logic or bravery. They were meant to break intruders entirely. The link between blood and treasure reveals much about the wizarding world's values. Wizards and goblins alike saw wealth not just as currency, but as legacy, something to be inherited and guarded with ferocity. In a society where family names carried weight long after individuals perished, a vault bound to blood was the ultimate statement. Only those of the true line deserved what lay within. It was not enough to guard gold with keys and curses. The vault had to recognize the owner's very life force, punishing pretenders with a ferocity that bordered on cruelty. In rereading the Lestrange vault scene, one cannot forget Hermione's desperation as the burning treasure piled upon them, multiplying faster than they could escape. "It's burning us!" she cried, her voice echoing in the cavernous vault. In that moment, the vault itself became a predator, enforcing ownership with merciless consistency. That experience revealed not only the dangers of breaking into Gringotts, but also the cruel genius of goblin enchantments. They had built a system where blood was more trustworthy than family, more enduring than loyalty, more precise than any spell. Blood alone could not be deceived. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this truth is how little wizards seem to question it. No one challenged the morality of blood wards, no one argued that such enchantments were excessive. Instead, they became a symbol of pride for ancient families, a way to boast about the impenetrability of their legacies. It is chilling to realize that the same culture that feared mudbloods and worshipped purebloods also built a financial system where blood determined ownership as ruthlessly as it determined social worth. Gringotts, in this sense, was not simply a bank. It was a mirror of wizarding prejudices, a fortress built on the belief that blood defined all. And so the next time one recalls Harry's wild ride through caverns or the dragon bursting from beneath the marble floors, one must also remember the invisible threads that bound those vaults together. The clinking of gold and the roar of goblin carts were only the surface. Beneath it lay an ancient, almost primal truth. At Gringotts, blood was the final key, the ultimate lock, and the deadliest weapon. It was a reminder that in the wizarding world, magic was never just about wands and words. Sometimes it was about the very essence of who you were and what you carried in your veins. Number 25. Ancient contract with the ministry. Gringotts has always stood as one of the most mysterious institutions in the wizarding world, looming over Diagon Alley with its crooked marble walls and guarded doors. Visitors, both witches and wizards, step inside with awe and unease, aware that they are entering a place ruled not by the Ministry of Magic, but by goblins, whose history is one of both service and rebellion. Few stop to wonder why the Ministry, so keen to regulate every aspect of magical life, from broomstick safety to cauldron thickness, never lays its hand on the bank. The answer lies in an ancient and unspoken treaty forged centuries ago, a contract that shaped the balance of power between humans and goblins. Without this pact, the glittering halls of Gringotts might never have survived into the time of Harry Potter. The roots of this agreement stretch back to the aftermath of the Goblin Rebellion of 1612, a bloody conflict fought in Hogsmeade and its surrounding highlands. Goblins, furious at wizarding attempts to seize control over their institutions, rose in violent defiance. Many lives were lost, and the magical economy nearly collapsed. In the fragile peace that followed, the ministry realized it could not simply conquer goblin banking by force. Goblins controlled the metals, the forging of enchanted coins, and the vaults that safeguarded fortunes of both noble families and common traders. To destroy them would have been to invite chaos, and so the ministry signed what came to be called the Custodian Pact. Goblins would own and govern Gringotts, while in exchange they swore to protect all. Deposits without discrimination and to ensure the financial stability of the wizarding world. This agreement explains why, during Harry's very first visit to Gringotts in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid could proudly declare, "You'd be mad to try and rob it. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts." That sense of safety was not only due to dragons or enchantments, but also the political shield provided by the treaty. The ministry itself had no authority to override goblin decisions, no matter how controversial. Even when Minister Cornelius Fudge expressed frustration at goblin secrecy in the 1990s, his hands were tied. The pact forbade interference, and the goblins never failed to remind wizards of this fact when challenged. What made the treaty so remarkable was the clause of conditional trust. Goblins promised protection of vaults and treasures, but if the ministry ever tried to meddle, the pact would be void, opening the gates to renewed conflict. This condition created a precarious balance. Wizards could deposit their riches, knowing that goblins were bound by honor and contract to guard them. Goblins, in turn, relished their independence, watching with quiet satisfaction as even the most powerful pure-blood families had no choice but to kneel to goblin clerks when opening vaults. It was a silent reversal of power, one that placed goblins in a position of unique authority inside wizarding Britain. The dangers of breaking this pact were illustrated most clearly during the First Wizarding War. While the Death Eaters sought to dominate the Ministry and impose their ideology, they hesitated to strike at Gringotts directly. Even Lord Voldemort, obsessed with control, treated the bank with a wary respect. His use of Bellatrix Lestrange's vault to hide Helga Hufflepuff's cup was a calculated move, exploiting the bank's security rather than destroying it. Voldemort understood that to wage war against goblins was to invite chaos on multiple fronts. The Ministry, weakened by his infiltration, knew that the pact was the only shield preventing goblin neutrality from tipping into open rebellion. There is a telling example in the historical record: the attempted breach of Gringotts in 1865 by the unscrupulous wizard Arcturus Knott. When Knott tried to coerce goblins into revealing the contents of rival vaults, the goblins invoked the pact and threatened to withdraw from all financial dealings with the Ministry. The scandal nearly toppled the ruling administration, and Knott was quietly exiled. This moment cemented in wizarding minds that the pact was not a mere piece of parchment, but the foundation of financial order. No wizard, however influential, could bend Gringotts to his will without catastrophic consequences. One cannot overlook the tension that lingered beneath this arrangement. Goblins often expressed bitterness about wizarding reluctance to share true ownership of goblin-forged items. The most famous example lies in the sword of Godric Gryffindor, reclaimed by goblins after the death of its bearer, only to be wrestled back by wizards. Such disputes simmered constantly, and the Ministry feared that any violation of the custodian pact would provide goblins with a pretext for another uprising. The events of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke into Bellatrix's vault, sent ripples of shock through this fragile balance. Griphook's words, "It is not your place to question the secrets of goblin kind," echoed the resentment that centuries of treaties could not erase. The Ministry's reliance on goblin neutrality was further tested in the aftermath of that break-in. Dragons were exposed, vaults were desecrated, and rumours spread that goblins might renounce the pact altogether. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who became minister after Voldemort's downfall, was forced into delicate negotiations, promising respect and autonomy to calm goblin leaders. Many historians argue that the very survival of wizarding Britain's economy after the Battle of Hogwarts depended on the reaffirmation of that ancient treaty. Without it, Gringotts might have closed its doors, sending witches and wizards scrambling to hide their fortunes under mattresses and floorboards. It is striking how ordinary witches and wizards rarely understood the existence of this pact. To them, Gringotts was simply a bank, a place to store galleons and retrieve them when needed. Yet beneath the marble counters and rattling carts lay centuries of tension and compromise. Even Albus Dumbledore, who respected goblin intellect deeply, admitted in his private writings that wizard-goblin relations remained a fragile thread woven with both necessity and mistrust. The treaty ensured peace but never erased suspicion. Wizards feared goblin rebellions, goblins feared wizard treachery. Both clung to the pact as one clings to a bridge over a chasm. Another revealing detail lies in the way goblins handled Ministry requests for information. During the investigations of the 1980s into suspected money laundering by dark wizards, Ministry officials attempted to audit Gringotts' accounts. Goblins flatly refused, citing the custodian pact. The scandal ended with the quiet resignation of two bureaucrats, humiliated by their inability to compel cooperation. This moment illustrates the extraordinary independence goblins enjoyed. No wizard institution, not even the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, could pierce the veil of secrecy surrounding the vaults. The Ministry could monitor broomsticks, owls, and even cauldrons, but Gringotts remained untouchable. The fear of another uprising loomed large in these refusals. Goblin rebellions were etched into wizarding memory, and the Ministry's leaders knew they could not risk rekindling that fire. Tales of massacres during the 17th and 18th century revolts haunted official policy. The Custodian Pact was more than a contract. It was a line of defense against bloodshed. As long as goblins kept treasures safe, wizards would not interfere. Yet everyone understood that if either side betrayed the pact, the consequences would be devastating. Vaults would be plundered, gold lost, trust shattered, and the fragile peace destroyed. For readers familiar with Harry Potter's journey, it is impossible not to see the irony. The boy who lived, often unaware of deeper politics, walked through Gringotts' doors many times without realizing that his very inheritance from James and Lily Potter was protected not by the ministry but by Goblin law. His family's fortune sat secure because generations earlier, wizards had learned the hard way that they could not control Goblin banking by force. It is a hidden truth that adds weight to every mention of his vault. Behind the piles of galleons lay centuries of uneasy compromise and the ever-present threat of rebellion. When Griphook demanded the sword of Gryffindor in exchange for helping Harry infiltrate Gringotts, he was not merely bargaining. He was invoking the centuries of injustice goblins felt, reminding Harry that goblin trust in wizards was fragile at best. That moment revealed the limits of the custodian pact. It guaranteed goblin control of the bank but did not heal wounds of ownership disputes or centuries of mistrust. The theft of the sword from Griphook after the break-in symbolized how easily that balance could be broken. The ministry, forced to repair relations in the aftermath, had to work tirelessly to reassure goblins that their autonomy remained intact. Ultimately, the story of the Gringotts Treaty is one of fragile survival. Without it, Wizarding Britain might have been torn apart by conflict between goblins and wizards, its economy shattered, its families ruined. With it, Gringotts became the unchallenged heart of magical finance, its crooked marble building standing as a monument to compromise and restraint. Yet every clink of gold in those vaults carries with it a reminder. If the treaty is ever broken, the wizarding world may once again face the fury of goblins, and the marble walls of Gringotts may echo not with coins, but with the sounds of war. Number 26, Hidden Exits into London. Of all the mysteries hidden beneath the streets of wizarding London, few are as overlooked as the idea that Gringotts Bank, the towering marble fortress guarded by goblins and dragons, is not merely a vault for treasure, but a labyrinth with roots reaching far beyond Diagon Alley. The books describe Gringotts as a place of spiraling passages, rattling minecarts, and vaults buried miles beneath the city. Yet when Rowling gave us glimpses into these caverns, she never lingered on the possibility that the bank's tunnels might stretch outward, threading through the ancient soil of London like veins of stone. Still, if one reads between the lines, the possibility emerges. Gringotts has always been more than a place of wealth. It has been a fortress, and fortresses need secret exits. The goblins who run Gringotts are portrayed as secretive and fiercely protective of their autonomy. From the first book, when Harry and Hagrid descend into the vaults, the warning is clear: enter stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. This inscription hints not only at the danger within, but also at the long-standing culture of defense and preparation that shaped the bank. Goblins do not build without redundancy, and they certainly do not trust their safety to a single door on Diagon Alley. The marble entrance may dazzle witches and wizards, but in times of crisis, what good would one gilded doorway be? If Gringotts was ever besieged, and wizarding history shows us that it nearly was during the Goblin rebellions, it is logical that escape routes were carved through the earth, leading discreetly to unexpected corners of London. Historical accounts from the 1612 rebellion at Hogsmeade suggest that goblins favoured underground warfare, tunnelling to surprise their enemies. If such tactics were used in battle, why would they not be applied in the heart of their most treasured stronghold? One can imagine how, centuries ago, goblin builders expanded Gringotts not just downward but outward, chiselling narrow stone passages that ended beneath unassuming spots on the surface. A forgotten courtyard near Fleet Street, the cellar of a crumbling inn on the Strand, or the soot-darkened arches under Blackfriars Bridge. These exits would never have been meant for ordinary use. They were lifelines kept in silence, guarded by memory and maps that no wizard has likely seen. A telling example appears in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when Harry, Ron and Hermione escape from Gringotts on the back of a dragon. Their reckless flight into the open sky dramatizes the truth that the bank is not a cage. Rowling describes the chaos. The dragon rose, shrieking and coughing, out of the crumbling passageway onto the marble steps of Gringotts. But what if the trio had not stumbled upon that dragon? Without it, their only path might have been one of those hidden routes. Some scholars argue that Rowling intentionally let the dragon serve as a cover for the deeper secret, that goblins, aware of intrusions, might have otherwise steered them toward a less visible escape, one leading not back to Diagon Alley, but into the deeper veins of London. The case of Ragnarok V, a legendary goblin whose name echoes in old wizarding records, further strengthens this theory. Documents kept in the Ministry's Department of Magical Law Enforcement hint at his role in designing reinforced vaults and subterranean conduits. One tattered parchment, now part of the Wizengamot archives, mentions goblin stone channels stretching toward the river. Though cryptic, this phrase suggests that some tunnels from Gringotts connect to the Thames itself. In a time of danger it would make sense. The river, broad and ever-moving, could serve as both hiding place and route to freedom. Few things are more difficult to trace than a fugitive carried downstream in enchanted boats or disguised beneath illusion charms. There are whispers in wizarding families that support this possibility. The Bones family, known for their tragic losses in both wars, kept a collection of manuscripts describing magical London. One anecdote speaks of a hooded figure who appeared in Whitechapel during the 1800s, carrying coins still warm from a vault. No one ever saw the man arrive, and his sudden appearance was explained as apparition. Yet the record mentions a lingering smell of stone and iron, not typical of apparition burns, but consistent with the stale air of an underground passage. Could this be evidence of someone using a hidden Gringotts exit? Even the geography of London offers clues. Beneath Charing Cross and Holborn lie abandoned sewer lines and forgotten plague tunnels, relics of the Muggle city. Wizards have long been adept at hiding their tracks within the infrastructure of non-magical society. If Gringotts had outlets beneath these districts, they would blend seamlessly into the clutter of old masonry and drains. The Statute of Secrecy, passed in 1692, demanded that magical pathways be concealed, and what better camouflage than the endless labyrinths of London's underground? To this day, ministry workers occasionally stumble upon passages they cannot explain, only to seal them up with enchantments rather than investigate too closely. One cannot overlook the fact that Gringott survived both Voldemort's reign of terror and the chaos of the Second Wizarding War. While other institutions fell, the bank remained unbroken, its goblin staff largely intact. How did they manage this resilience? Some credit their neutrality, others their skill with curses and locks. But perhaps the real advantage was their network of secret exits, allowing them to maneuver and survive when siege seemed inevitable. A fortress with only one entrance would have been vulnerable. A fortress with dozens of hidden arteries would be nearly impossible to pin down. A specific case that deserves attention is the disappearance of the dark wizard Eldred Warple during the early 20th century, known primarily as the author of Blood Brothers. My Life Amongst the Vampires, Warple vanished after being accused of attempting to rob a minor vault. Ministry records state he was last seen near the Gringotts main hall, but search parties never found him in Diagon Alley. Some speculate he used apparition, though anti-disapparition charms are said to be layered heavily over the bank. A more plausible explanation is that he slipped into one of the goblin escape routes, aided by corruption or bribery, and emerged far from the eyes of aurors. His disappearance remains unsolved, but the idea of a hidden tunnel explains it more cleanly than any official report. Quotes from the books themselves reveal the scale of the underground world. When Hagrid and Harry travel to Harry's vault in Philosopher's Stone, Rowling writes they were now going through a maze of twisting passages. A maze implies not one direct path, but a web. The cart moved so swiftly that Harry could not remember the turns, yet that detail itself is suspicious. If Gringotts' carts were only ferrying gold, why would they need a maze? The goblins created confusion deliberately, so that anyone without their guidance would be hopelessly lost. A maze also offers multiple destinations, not only vaults but perhaps those secret, rarely used exits that lead into the Muggle city.